European migrant crisis continues to be public enemy number one as conflict and depleted infrastructure in the Middle East and North Africa drives increasing amounts of Syrians, Eritreans, and sub-Saharan Africans out of their homelands in search of a safe start. In June of 2015, over 567,875 migrants were still awaiting answers for their asylum applications. Europe continues to struggle with the influx of migrants and refugees as broken migration policy, political headbutting, and Saudi Arabia's indifference to the issue diminish efforts to resolve this crisis. With improved cooperation and aid from Saudi Arabia, revamped and revised immigration policy, and sustainable refugee and asylum centers in the Middle East and North Africa, the European Union can resolve this migration crisis in a clear, effective, and humane way. The help of Saudi financial aid and diplomatic influence in the region can bolster the infrastructure and civil services of Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq. Leaders have begun to wonder why Saudi Arabia has done little to help with the aid or financial problems plaguing the refugee and migrant crisis. While Saudi Arabia has allowed over 500,000 Syrians to enter the nation on a working basis, they have let almost no Syrians in on asylum status. There are other ways for the Saudis to get involved and set an example for reparations in the war-torn and exhausted region. Investing financially in these undeveloped and corrupt nations will produce dividends for the Saudis economically. With the addition of Saudi support, it could create a domino effect with other Gulf nations. Seeing the commitment of Saudi Arabia to proactively combat this crisis will empower other nations to increase their own efforts. With the help of the Saudis proactively supporting the nations around Syria, the EU can move to establish and conduct the same kind of support in other hotspots of North Africa, Italy, and Greece. Besides the exodus through Turkey to Europe, another popular jumping stone is North Africa. Migrants often rely on human traffickers to make the journey across the Mediterranean. Due to a regulation in the Dublin Migrant Resolution, 5 EU nations have had to filter around 72% of all asylum applications received. Another stipulation is that all migrants must be held in the first European country they arrive in for at least a year or until they receive an answer for their asylum application. This has led to many countries becoming overwhelmed by their lack of infrastructure. A solution to stunning this crisis and burden would be to immediately initiate this process in hotspots for illegal migrant and refugee crossings. By building up the nation's human services and economic situations, these countries can turn these hopping points into viable options for resettlement in hopes of assimilation. Another positive of this option is that it makes it culturally appealing for them to resettle in an area of familiar culture and language. In addition, a safe countries list would help countries expedite asylum applications and, where needed, deportations. Two prominent European politicians, Donald Tusk and Dimitris Papadimitriou, are in support of this idea. Donald Tusk, who chairs the EU summits, has called for reception centers closer to conflict zones outside of Europe, where refugees already exist. In addition to Mr. Tusk, Mr. Papadimitriou states his resolution to the European migrant crisis as we need to invest political resources and financial incentives to make sure that the next country that might have a problem doesn't become so bad people are fleeing for their lives. These two leaders highlight the same 3 salient points as a means for a solution: investment for opportunity, security, and pre-documentation. When creating and implementing these means, not only does the system become more organized by cutting down on refugees who do not meet the legal asylum status, but homes are potentially created, overall basic human needs are met, security is established, as well as an opportunity to improve their economic status. Due to Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, and Egypt receiving the brunt of this migration crisis, they will have to receive a large portion of this support. Corruption is a concerning issue that has plagued these countries. How will all the financial resources necessary to create an environment of change and support reach its final destination intact? Critics ask. According to Transparency.org, Jordan ranks number 45th, Turkey at 66, Lebanon at 123, and Egypt at 88. With rankings like these, it is a very valid concern. A major condition of success for this plan is hands-on work. The EU and Gulf nations have to take a direct and intense role when combating this migration issue. Whether it comes to building the centers or financially bankrolling their own projects and humanitarian aid at the other nation's consent, it has to be done. A benefit from such an involved role would be increased transparency of expenditures and economic growth they can monitor. Governments would be able to recognize what they have and where they have it, furtherly increasing the organization required to effectively combat this problem. Jobs will be created as rebuilding will be key for this region's future. By oversight and a direct level of involvement, the financial aid granted to Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt will be used to maximum potential without the adverse effects of corruption. The application of these methods and efforts will allow these migrants to reestablish their lives and homes. They will have the opportunity to immediately be a part of a productive reestablishment movement without having to travel half the world over. I would like to thank my audience, Caroline, my sister, my father, my mom for filming, and Nan and TK for tuning in on Skype. Have a good day.